This section treats of the adventures of Sir Perceval. So we move from the madness of Lancelot to Perceval. And it might seem somewhat disjoint that we jump suddenly to Perceval and his adventures. Remember that this story tells its narrative in a way somewhat different from what we're used to. We were normally used to a story starting at the beginning and working its way to the finish. But Malory doesn't tell his story that way. His story is told in some ways like a Celtic tapestry or a Celtic interlacing of creatures. If you've ever seen this image of Celtic design, the creatures loop in on themselves and they twist around in mazes, and the Celtic image is of a dragon. It's the looping of a dragon in on itself. And Celtic storytelling was traditionally always this way. If you read the older works like Mabinogion, for instance, or the earlier stories of Arthur, they tell this roundabout way of narrative. And that's what Malory is doing. And by doing that roundabout way, we end up having this reduplication that occurs, as we mentioned earlier. One character mirrors another. One character represents another. So in this instance, Perceval is bearing a resemblance to Lancelot and bearing a resemblance to Arthur. It's in order to look at the same problem of masculinity in different ways. And Perceval, in his martial glory, goes out into the wilderness and he meets with Hector de Maris, and they have a huge battle, and both of them beat the tar out of each other. And by the end of it, they're near death, the two of them. And only then do they recognize who the other one is. And they have to have the Grail appear, and the Holy Grail appear, and it heals them both. And they're both okay by the end of this, and they go off happy as friends. But notice that in their rush to do martial glory with one another, they end up almost killing one another, and they're brothers on the round table. This is a parallel to something later, which is the Civil War. It's also something that I think harkens back to Lancelot's not recognizing things when they're right in front of him. Perceval's mother earlier has said to him, remember that your father, King Pellinore, who, remember, sought the questing beast, King Pellinore was killed by Gawain. Gawain's like the anti-knight. He is what a knight should not be. And Pellinore, who sought to follow that dragon, the questing beast, was killed by Gawain. And your brother was killed also, she says. So remember this sorrow, and it will keep you on the straight and narrow, she says. And of course, we find out later, Perceval is one of the knights that achieves the Grail quest. He succeeds at the Grail quest. And so his success is partly due to his remembering death, as the Latin phrase says, memento mores, remember death. And he keeps this death of his father and the death of his brother in mind, and it keeps him from becoming an anti-knight like Gawain. There's a connection, though, I think, between the Gawain figure and Lancelot and the Perceval figure and Bors. If we go back a couple chapters, we see that it's Sir Bors who shows up in Corbin looking for his brother Lancelot. And he finds out Lancelot's got a child, and he's overjoyed. This is wonderful. My brother has a child, which is so fantastic. And that's the natural human reaction. It's a reaction that we ought to have to somebody who's making a life and making a family and bringing new life into the world. Bors then ends up being this kind of holy man who is a counterweight to Lancelot, just as Perceval is like a counterweight to Gawain. And notice that Bors is also one of the men who achieves the Grail later on. So Bors and Perceval both achieve the Grail later on. But Bors has what I think is the most fascinating dream in this section. And I wanted to look just closely at it, if we could, for just a minute. The text tells us in chapter 5, Sir Bors was where came in an hideous lion. And Sir Bors dressed him unto the lion, and anon the lion bereft him his shield. And with his sword Sir Bors smote off the lion's head. Right so, for Sir Bors forthwithal saw a dragon in the court passing horrible, and there seemed letters of gold written in his forehead. And Sir Bors thought that the letters made a signification of King Arthur. Right so there came an horrible leopard and an old, and there they fought long and did great battle together. And at last the dragon spit out of his mouth as it had been 100 dragons, and lightly all the small dragons slew the old dragon and tear him all to pieces. Anon withal there came an old man into the hall, and he sat down in a fair chair, and there seemed to be 2 adders about his neck. The old man had an harp, And there he sang an old song, how Joseph of Arimathea came into this land. Then when he had sung, the old man bade Sir Bors go from thence. Now this strange dream is rich in imagery, and the medieval mind, which thrived on symbolism, color symbolism, number symbolism, animal symbolism, would have seen in this something of the mystic, the mythical, the holy, the things that surround the Holy Grail. It's dream imagery. And yet those three creatures, the lion, the dragon, and the leopard, also represent states of mind, if you will. I'm reminded of an opening of a great work by Dante Alighieri called The Divine Comedy. In the first book, Inferno, he wakes in a dark wood and he meets with three creatures as well, a she-wolf, a lion, and a leopard. The imagery is very similar here. The lion represents pride and thinking you're better than you really are. The dragon represents violence, and especially the violence towards women, wanting to dominate the world. The leopard represents, or traditionally represents, carnal desire, carnal lust. And these creatures all present a threat to Bors. They fight with one another and they present a threat to Bors. Not all of the dream can be explained directly, but it creates this image of violence and tension which later will plague the Round Table and certainly seems to plague the mind of Lancelot. Lancelot seems to be a man who is as though in his head lions and dragons and leopards were wrestling constantly. Not as bad perhaps as Macbeth in Shakespeare's play, who says, "Full of scorpions is my mind." But Lancelot seems like he could say, "Full of lions" or "full of dragons is my mind." It's plagued by these creatures in this dreamlike way. Bors then is, at the end of that dream, he is cured by the Holy Grail. The Grail appears with the dove with the censer in its mouth, and there's all manner of good things to eat. And Bors finds himself in heaven. And it's in heaven that he has this last vision of the old man who prophesies something to him. And in Book 6, the old man prophesies something which clues us in to the nature, not of Bors so much, but of Lancelot, and consequently clues us into what is wrong with the Lancelot character. This is what he says. "Now said that old man to Sir Bors, Go ye to your cousin, Sir Lancelot, and tell him of this adventure, the which had been most convenient for him of all earthly knights. But sin is so foul in him, he may not achieve such holy deeds. For had not been his sin, he had passed all the knights that ever were in his days. And tell thou, Sir Lancelot, of all worldly adventures, he passeth in manhood and prowess all better. But in the spiritual matters, he shall have many his better." And that seems to summarize the issue of Lancelot right there. Lancelot seeks worldly fame, worldly goodness, glory, success, if you will. And because of that, he is the best of all knights on this world. He is a knight who has achieved everything he could possibly want on this world. But the author seems to be saying there's more to life than this world. It's not just about this world. There's something more. And Lancelot doesn't get that. He doesn't understand that. And consequently, he gets surpassed by many knights who may not be great knights, but end up being great human beings. Malloy seems to be suggesting that if we think that the glory and the fame of this world is sufficient, if all we ever strive for is the riches and the wealth and the awards of this world, we'll achieve those riches and those wealths and those rewards, and that will be it. We'll never actually achieve the Grail. The human perfection doesn't lie in this world. It lies in being beyond this world, seeing something else beyond this world. And consequently, Lancelot is a man who our heart goes out to, but he ends up being a failure because he doesn't actually see that the important thing is not worldly fame. It's that love, beauty, joy in the next world.